Imagine waking up to a seemingly ordinary winter morning in Halifax, Canada, in 1917. The sun is just beginning to rise over the harbor, mist clinging to the water's surface. Ships rock gently at their moorings, people stroll along the streets, merchants prepare for another day of business, children play in the snow, and families enjoy a quiet breakfast. The city hums with life, busy yet unassuming. No one suspects that in just a matter of hours, the calm and routine will be shattered in a way that will leave a mark on history. A single, devastating explosion is about to engulf Halifax, turning the harbor into a storm of fire, steel, and chaos. This is not just a story about a tragic event, it is a story about human resilience, about ordinary people who found courage in the face of unimaginable destruction, and about a city that would rise from the ashes, scarred but unbroken. By the end of this story, you will know the scale of the disaster, the lives it touched, and the lessons it left behind. But first, we need to understand the stage upon which this tragedy was set. Halifax was more than just a city. It was a critical wartime port, a place of immense strategic importance. And on the morning of December 6, 1917, it was about to become the site of one of the largest man-made explosions the world had ever seen. Halifax in 1917 was a city that thrived on commerce and maritime activity. Its harbor was one of the busiest on the continent, a lifeline for the Allied forces during the First World War. Supplies, munitions, coal, food, and countless other essential goods arrived daily, offloaded by sailors, dock workers, and port authorities working tirelessly. The streets echoed with the sounds of hammers, engines, and the chatter of people rushing to and fro. But behind this apparent vibrancy lay tension. War was in the air, literally and figuratively. Ships laden with explosives and ammunition docked alongside vessels carrying food and medicine. The stakes were high, the harbor crowded, and mistakes would not only be costly, they would be catastrophic. Two ships in particular would come to define the tragedy of that day. The Norwegian vessel Imo carried supplies for Belgium, humanitarian aid meant to alleviate the suffering caused by the war. The French cargo ship Mont Blanc, on the other hand, carried something far more dangerous. Hidden from view, beneath crates of harmless-looking goods, were explosives, TNT, picric acid, and nearly 3,000 tons of highly combustible chemicals, including benzol and ammonium nitrate. A collision involving this ship would be more than an accident, it would be an inferno. The harbor itself was narrow, icy, and congested. Navigating it required careful planning, coordination, and skill. Yet, on that December morning, all of these elements, the ships, the human decisions, the winter ice, the war pressures, would align in the most tragic way possible. Nobody could have imagined the scale of the disaster that was about to unfold. At 8:45 in the morning, the two ships found themselves on a collision course near the narrows of Halifax Harbor. The Imo was departing the port, trying to make way through the icy waters, while the Mont Blanc was slowly making its way toward Bedford Basin, its deck heavy with lethal cargo. Signals were misread, communications faltered, and panic began to spread among the crews. Every sailor knew something was wrong, but no one could stop what was coming. The Mont Blanc, despite its massive load, moved slowly, and it was here that a critical misunderstanding sealed its fate. Sailors shouted warnings, trying to maneuver the ships apart, but in the confined harbor, there was little room for error. A small spark, a simple collision of steel hulls was enough to ignite the volatile cargo hidden below deck. Crew members understood almost immediately that the ship had become a floating bomb. Smoke began to rise from the cargo hold, a faint chemical smell drifting over the water, but many on shore were blissfully unaware. Life went on as if nothing was amiss. Captain Lemedec, commanding the Mont Blanc, ordered his crew to abandon ship. They leaped into the icy harbor waters, some struggling to survive the freezing temperatures. The crew knew that the vessel had become a ticking time bomb. Yet for many people across Halifax, the danger remained invisible, unheard, and uncomprehended. Time seemed to slow, as if the city itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. And then, at precisely 9:04 a.m., the unthinkable happened. The Mont Blanc erupted in a fireball of unimaginable scale. The sky above Halifax lit up as though it were day in the middle of the night. A shockwave radiated outward, tearing through streets, buildings, and homes. Windows shattered miles away. The force of the blast was so great that ships in the harbor were hurled onto the shore, and the deck of the Mont Blanc was obliterated, sending flaming debris into the air like missiles. For those on the streets, the experience was surreal. People were lifted off the ground by the blast, thrown across snow-covered streets. Trees were uprooted, horses bolted in terror. A deafening roar accompanied the blinding flash. It was, at the time, the largest human-made explosion in history, before even the atomic bomb existed. Entire neighborhoods were leveled in an instant. The center of Halifax Harbor was unrecognizable, a crater of fire and twisted metal. Yet amidst the chaos, individual stories of survival began to emerge. One young boy, thrown from his bed, landed in a snowdrift, stunned but alive. A nurse in a nearby hospital, surrounded by falling debris, worked tirelessly to treat the wounded, ignoring her own injuries. Families were torn apart, some members missing, others miraculously unscathed, creating scenes of both horror and hope. The scale of the disaster was impossible to comprehend. It was not just an explosion, it was an event that reshaped the very identity of the city, leaving a mark that would be remembered for generations. As the smoke cleared, Halifax was a city in shock. The streets were strewn with debris, shattered glass, twisted metal, charred wood, and snow trampled into mud by the chaos. Fires raged uncontrollably, fed by ruptured gas lines and overturned stoves. The cries of the wounded filled the air, competing with a distant wail of sirens and the hurried footsteps of rescuers. Hospitals overflowed with casualties. Families searched desperately for missing loved ones. The scale of the devastation was staggering. Yet, amid the destruction, acts of heroism emerged. Ordinary citizens ran into burning buildings to save neighbors. Firefighters, fully aware of the danger, battled the flames without pause. Doctors and nurses, their own homes damaged or destroyed, tended to the wounded. Amid the tragedy, humanity shone. Strangers helped strangers. In the midst of chaos, community became a lifeline. For hours, the city struggled to understand what had just occurred. The blast had killed approximately 2,000 people outright, injured nearly 9,000, and left around 25,000 homeless. Buildings were flattened, streets impassable, and the harbor filled with sunken vessels. The enormity of the disaster overwhelmed first responders, yet their courage never faltered. The citizens of Halifax faced not only physical destruction, but emotional trauma on an unprecedented scale. Entire families vanished in an instant, homes disappeared, and the city's identity itself seemed threatened. But even as despair loomed, the human spirit began to assert itself. In the days following the explosion, the extent of the tragedy became clearer. Survivors recounted stories of escape, loss, and heroism. Children wandered the streets alone, searching for parents who had vanished. Rescue teams, aided by volunteers from across Canada and as far as Boston, combed through the wreckage, pulling survivors from the rubble. Boston's aid in particular would become legendary, forging a bond between cities that survives to this day. Ships carrying medical supplies, blankets, food, and rescue personnel arrived to assist a city overwhelmed. Yet, even as help poured in, grief remained. Families mourned, loved ones lost, homes destroyed, businesses obliterated. The city faced the monumental task of rebuilding not just its infrastructure, but its very sense of community and safety. The explosion also had far-reaching implications. Maritime regulations were re-examined. Procedures for transporting dangerous cargo were changed. Harbor safety became a global concern, spurred by the realization that a single mistake could have catastrophic consequences. The Halifax explosion was no longer just a local tragedy, it was a wake-up call for the world. And yet, within the ashes, stories of resilience flourished. Survivors shared accounts of courage, survival against all odds, and the remarkable ability of humans to rebuild after disaster. These stories became part of Halifax's collective memory, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming destruction, life finds a way to continue. The Halifax explosion remains a defining moment in Canadian history. Beyond the immediate devastation, it left lasting lessons about safety, preparedness, and the human capacity for resilience. Memorials, museums, and annual commemorations ensure that the event is not forgotten. Scholars study it not only as a historical event, but also as a case study in disaster management, urban planning, and human psychology. The legacy of the explosion also extends to the personal descendants of survivors, still recount family stories, letters, and photographs. These personal narratives remind us that history is not only made up of dates and numbers, but of human experiences, emotions, and courage. The Halifax Explosion, in essence, is a testament to the fragility and resilience of life. In the aftermath, Halifax rebuilt itself. Streets were cleared, homes reconstructed, and businesses reopened. But the city never forgot the day that changed it forever. Every memorial, every plaque, every story passed down through generations serves as a reminder of the human capacity to endure, rebuild, and thrive in the face of unimaginable tragedy. The Halifax Explosion was a tragedy that shook not just a city, but the world. Yet, it was also a story of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. From the ashes of destruction, the people of Halifax rose, stronger and wiser, carrying forward the lessons learned from that fateful day. As we remember the lives lost, the families shattered, and the heroism displayed, we are reminded of the fragile nature of life, the power of community, and the enduring capacity of humans to endure even the most unimaginable hardships. Halifax would never be the same, but neither would its people. Thank you for joining me in exploring the story of the Halifax Explosion. If this story moved you, consider subscribing to the channel for more in-depth historical documentaries, and share this story so others can witness the incredible resilience of the human spirit. History is not just about the past, it is a guide for our future, a testament to our strength, and a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can prevail.